Hey, and welcome to week 13. This is our final week of content for the class, and this week's topic is technology and elementary science education. Our guide for this week is that you're going to read chapter 11, which is about technology. I think it says technology in elementary science classrooms. Just a word of warning that you'll find that some of this is kind of dated information, especially depending on which version of the book you're using. And I would just encourage you to still read it because the principles there are the same. It just maybe would be updated to new technology. There are 3 videos that you'll watch, and I'll kind of address them as we go through the presentation today. And as you watch those videos, you'll really be thinking about some things that'll help you to answer the reflection questions. Your activity is that during the presentation, there are sites listed both for places where students can go and use technology to read, and also places where students can go and use technology to participate in applied labs. You'll check out 3 of those sites. There's more information about that on the assignment sheet about how you need to have 1 reading site and 1 lab site included. So we're going to talk a little bit about how technology plays a role in science, both in terms of gathering information, investigating, and collaborating. And I think it's really important that we are, open about the fact that a lot of the time the resources our students access are digital formats. They are accessed online. And so we need to make sure that we're really aware of how working within learning in those technology-rich environments might alter our definitions of how we do science and require us to think about some different things. These are the 3 kind of lenses that we'll use to look at it. I want to just define a technology-rich environment. Could be anything. It could be a blog or a wiki, an online search engine that's giving us access to other texts and tools. It can be a simulation, a video, an online tool to create a concept map, a chart, or a graph. All of those things are the kinds of digital media and digital tools that our students have access to. In your book, it talks more about, or it has a whole section about things like a word processing tool and kind of the basic Microsoft Office tools, which those are also important. However, I'm hopeful that many of you, when you were in school, had exposure to those tools, and so it is more second nature to include those in instruction, and that maybe looking at some of these more recent tools is really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about using digital tools to gather information. We can use things like Google Scholar or blogs or wikis or Wikipedia or a bunch of the sites that I'll list in a minute to gather information, either ourselves to provide to students or to allow students to gather information. And I think that this is one of the biggest kind of revolutions in technology in terms of education and science is this ability to just go online and find things out. There are a few key considerations that come with that. First is the idea of evaluating digital information sources. So if you're allowing students, if you're at a grade level where it's appropriate for students to find their own sources, having them be able to think about things like, is the source reliable? How do you know that it's reliable? Who's the author of the source? And what's their purpose in writing, publishing, or posting it? And then, can we look at a variety of sources and do they confirm or contradict one another? And then how do you resolve conflicts? For those of you working with young enough students that they wouldn't be finding their own sources, it's important for you to ask those questions, and also for you to be open with students about how you're making your decisions. That one bit of modeling of just talking with your students about why this is a good choice, why this is an article that we would want to look at or a source that we would want to look at is really great for them in the long term to be thinking about those things. The second thing that we need to think about is maintaining focus. The minute you give a screen to a child, you really start to have a lot of danger in terms of kind of losing that focus and having students go off and do other things. So that, one way of dealing with it is just to make it so that they can't do other things, put locks and controls on the screens, the devices, the computers. However, possibly a better way to approach it is to really think about things that you can do to maintain their focus. So one thing is to have authentic questions, things they really actually care about and want to find out about. Another is to have meaningful goals, to allow them to set their own goal or to allow them to modify the goal, or have a goal that is going to relate back to them in some way. To talk with them openly about metacognition and help them to really think about, do I understand what I'm reading? Is the page that I'm reading meaningful? Do I know if I'm on the right page? Am I actually asking myself those questions? And then the last thing is to make sure there's a relationship to other activities, that things that involve digital media and digital tools should never be standalone activities, because it is much harder for kids to focus if it's just a one-time thing, versus being able to incorporate other things into it. I've listed these in the assignment sheet. These are some great sites that students can use to go to find information. You can go to the sites in advance and see if the information that they're looking for would be there, and if it is, you can actually send them and have them do an isolated search just on one of these sites, or you can find something for them on one of these sites. But these are sites that have a variety of reading levels available, and topics available for students. One of the videos that you're going to watch this week is a teacher modeling the process of using a website and thinking about whether or not it's valid, and asking those questions that I talked about just a minute ago about evaluating the source. For most of you, this is probably at a grade level that you'll need to kind of adapt down, but it's a great example of what it would look like for a teacher to think through this out loud with their students. And there are meaningful ways to do this, even with very young children like kindergartners, where you might identify the author and some of those simple characteristics that they can understand. The next thing is the idea of using digital tools to actually do the investigation. And for this, I'm going to have you watch a video that shows a bunch of different ways that we use simulations in science. So we use simulations for a lot of reasons. Things are too big, too dangerous, too expensive, too long of time, and all the opposites of all those things, except too cheap. We never are using simulations because it was too inexpensive to do the lab. And we've actually done a couple of simulation type activities this semester in the class so that we could kind of experience what that can be like, and what some of those are today. But I would encourage you to watch the video to really be aware of how much in science simulations are being used, that doing a simulation isn't a non-authentic way of addressing things. In many cases, it is the most authentic way, that is the way that scientists would be doing these things today. The key benefits in a classroom to simulations: they help students translate among multiple representations. They provide students the opportunity to really think about what it would look like to represent the things that they're talking about and learning about. And that's a really important skill, and we talked about that when we read the article, I believe it was by Alverman, about kind of the different symbiotic systems or symbolic systems of science. The second thing is they help students build mental models of systems, which those mental models are really essential to understanding. They give students engaging, hands-on, active learning experiences. I know a lot of people have kind of commented on, I'd rather be outside with my students, but again, to realize how much these simulations are used as the way that scientists do their work. So you wouldn't probably want to use a simulation to do something you could do outside, but there are a lot of things that you can't go outside to do, and so using a simulation for those is really valuable. Help students understand equations and relationships when you see the manipulation of a variable, and I know a lot of you saw that when we played around with those ICT tasks from NAEP. You really saw that you could see the relationships, you could see the measurements, you could see the equations in a different way. They can serve as a vehicle for collaboration. Sometimes you have students do them alone, sometimes they do them as a group. When they do them as a group, they really experience collaboration. And then again, they allow students to investigate things that wouldn't be possible in a classroom or a lab. Some great sites for students to use. The first one here is the ICTs that we already looked at earlier in the semester, but there are 3 additional ones that you could go in and look at the different different simulations. And I think that for the PhET simulation, the link that I have here is an elementary link, but they have middle school and high school links as well. The last thing that we want to talk about is this idea of using digital tools to communicate. 100 years ago, the collaborations that scientists were able to have were really formal due to the limits of communication and distance. Today, they can communicate quickly with each other, and that allows increased collaboration in their work. Some of this is really informal, like email, but there are also examples of how scientists use technology-rich environments to enhance their work outside of just email. I think I rely on digital media and those collaborations a lot. The idea of crowdsourcing and being able to go online and even looking for something that's in print and pulling it in a digital format, and then being able to share that with people, having things like webinar or web meetings. Um, the video that I have linked to here is intended to really help you think about why this matters for your kids to get used to this. And be proficient in this idea of collaborating through tools like this. What that looks like in kindergarten is going to be really different than in 8th grade, but the idea is to provide your students with a relevant experience for their age range of collaborating through tools like this, because it will be very much what they need when they get out into the world. So you have 4 guiding questions this week. 1, given the grade level you plan to teach, what do you feel is an appropriate way to integrate technology into the classroom? And again, I know that we all would prefer to go outside and do a hands-on lab where possible. However, I really want you to be able to address the value of the technology and what the technology can bring beyond what we're able to do without it. Not to replace what we would do without it, but to add to it. The next one, why is it important to expose students to technology in the context of science? How can you use technology to help students experience collaboration? And which 3 sites did you visit and what was your experience like? That'll be the last forum post that you do for this semester, and I look forward to reading your responses.